Thank you for the beautiful offering song. He gets back. And I prepared a little bit of a shorter message today since we had the testimonies and everything, and I wasn't sure how long they were going to go for. They were fairly short, so it's just going to be a shorter service today, so I hope you don't mind. I'm going to talk today about Foundation for a Meaningful Life, and I got the inspiration for this message because a couple weeks ago, I was invited to go on a run to, with some of the guys to REI, and it was a really good experience. I've been doing it once a month for the last few months on and off, but this time, my running partner really encouraged me to put my mind over matter, kind of like, you can do better than you think you can. And I think the last time I went, I just walked the whole way back. So I figured I could do better. But you have to understand, and you already know, but when you do something like running, 3 or 4 miles from never running, it's really hard on your body, and you're sore for a week afterwards, which is fine. But this time, I really pushed myself, partly because I was just being encouraged to, and I was like, yeah, mind over matter, exactly. I can do better than I think I can. Maybe I don't have to just walk all the way back. Maybe I can at least run halfway back or something like that. So, I was really pushing myself, and it was good. It was good. But then later that day or the next day, my leg and my knee started to really hurt. And before I knew it, as I'm walking around doing different errands and things like that, my knee's really like in pain, and I'm having a hard time going upstairs, and like everything I normally would do was very painful. And then we were leaving the next day for Missouri, and I just was hoping that I was going to be able to drive okay, that it was going to go away fairly quickly. And after about a week and a half, it was mostly gone, but then we got back, and then yesterday, it started hurting again. So it's still bothering me a little bit, but it's not nearly as bad as it was. But it was kind of a lesson for me, and it's kind of got me thinking about this. It's really great to push yourself, and it's really great to go beyond your limits of what you think you can do physically or relationally or spiritually or whatever in your life. But it may have some unintended consequences of just not really having a foundation, or not having the preparation or the practice of being able to do that thing you tried to do. And maybe in the moment you'll be able to do it well. But it's much better and much less chance of consequences if we make a habit, if we build a foundation for maybe the type of life we want to live, type of relationships we want to have, kind of attitude I want to have. It's like Christian was talking about in his testimony. Put on your life is good glasses. That's really hard to do if you live your life day to day with life is bad glasses. But if you practice every day, even in small things, even in a moment where you have reason to be resentful or have reason to be to feel bad about yourself, but even in those moments, making effort to see maybe God's perspective or see the brighter side of things, then when a very difficult experience in your life comes along, which, to varying degrees we all have, then it's going to be much easier for you to be able to actually see the positive aspect of that experience. Because in reality, if we don't have that practice, then many times it can be really easy to become bitter about life. And we all know people who are like that. So we have to make sometimes very difficult decisions in our life. Some decisions are simple, some decisions are very difficult. Maybe you have to take a job where you won't make as much money as you would otherwise, but there's some other benefit or some other less undesirable aspect of it. Or maybe we make a mistake and we have to own up to that mistake. Maybe we have to apologize. Maybe we have to make things right, even if we don't want to, or we didn't feel like, maybe you didn't feel like that would be fair. Or maybe sometime you might feel like you have to forgive a wrong that was done to you. That's a very hard thing to do. Or to let go of an unrealistic expectation for yourself or for others. It's not easy to follow through with the commitments that we make in our life, even if in the moment we really feel like we will, like marriage vows, right? You commit to that person, in sickness or in health for the whole in your life, or in our church, it's all eternity. And, somewhere along the way, you might have doubts. You might get a little bit stuck and wonder, can I really do this, or do I really want to do this? Sometimes you have to follow through with your commitments even if you don't feel like it. I remember a few years back, I promised to help somebody move their stuff. And I had someone who was going to help, so there was going to be 3 of us. And a couple days before the date for moving, I messaged the other person. I was like, hey, you're still coming, right? And the other person was like, I'm so sorry, I forgot, and I made another plan, so I can't come. But then I realized, this is my birthday, actually, so I don't want to go either. But I promised that person that I would help them, and even though the other person I was going to help me wasn't able to come, I just decided that, I could just say, I'm sorry, I can't help, and that would have been fairly reasonable. But I've always felt it's very important that when you make a promise to do something, that you do everything that you can do to fulfill that promise. I think that's really important. Integrity has always been, I think, something very important to me. I think it's also very spiritually important as well. Like for our life of faith, sometimes we make promises to God. And the Bible is full of, covenants where people made promises to God, God made promises to people. I think that when we make commitments, we have to take them very seriously. Even if it feels like a burden sometimes. Like this case, I really didn't want to go, but I made the promise, and I didn't want them to suffer because I fell through with my promise. But then surprisingly, I went there, we got it all done, and then, Facebook, right, tells everybody it's your birthday. So a few days later, maybe it was a day later or something like that, they were like, oh my God, it was your birthday. I can't believe you came and helped. And then every time they write me in the last couple years, they always bring up that experience. They were like, they really felt cared for and appreciated in God's love because I was willing to do that. It made a big impact on them, even though for me it was just, helping someone move. And so I was surprised even by how much of an impact that could have on them simply by me following through with a commitment that I had made in a difficult situation. So, building your life on principles, living for God, living for others, it doesn't just happen because we decide to one day. We have to make a foundation for it. Whether you're 18 years old or you're 80 years old, you can start working on that now. There's a really cool excerpt from the Divine Principle I wanted to share. The key to God's first blessing is the perfection of individual character. As individuals, an individual's mind and body are discrete projections and object partners of God's dual characteristics. In order for an individual to perfect his character, he must form a 4-position foundation within himself, whereby his mind and body become one through give and take action with God as their center. Such individuals become the temples of God, achieve complete oneness with him. Because the center of his mind is God, he also lives as a substantial object partner to God. Both the mind and body rejoice as they experience their internal nature and external form through the stimulation which their object partners give them. Accordingly, when people realize God's first blessing, they become God's beloved, who inspire him with joy. Sharing all the feelings of God as their own, they would never commit any sinful acts that would cause God grief. So the part here, and there's a lot of really great parts to that, but the part that really stuck out to me on this topic is this part here where it talks about he establishes a four-position foundation within himself whereby his mind and body become one through give and take action with God as their center. Right? So, I mean, the concept of mind-body unity is not new in this world. You know, we have yin and yang and mind over matter and, mind-body, discipline, right? But what the principle is talking about here is mind and body unity with God as the center, which is a very, clear difference in my mind. The idea is that our mind and our hearts and our energy and our motivation is directed towards God as like our priority. It's like our number one reason for existing. It's our number one reason for living. And then we unite our body based off of that. Not just mind-body unity so that we can run instead of walk, or that we can lift more weights, or that, I can push myself to work more hours, or lose weight, which are all important things, don't get me wrong. But mind and body unity, that I can live my life in accordance with my conscience and the way that God, directions and way that God may have for me in my life. It's very different. It's very beautiful. And I think that's something that's God is looking for in terms of our lives and what kind of people we're trying to become. Everything kind of starts from this point. Everything starts from this point of yourself. We have many problems in the world and many problems in society and many problems in our families. And so many of these things can be traced back to our individual self. How much is my mind and body centered on God as the center of my life, my family? We talk about the four fallen natures, right? Failure to see from God's point of view, taking dominion, leaving one's proper position, and multiplying evil. And all of those things are based on the first one. Because if it wasn't for failing to see for God's viewpoint, then the others would be meaningless. They wouldn't be a thing. We have the three great blessings: to be fruitful, to multiply, and have dominion. We can do all three of those things, but they really fundamentally based off the first one. And we can do the other things, but just like how I could run for 3 miles, but if we don't have a strong foundation, then those things would end up, our ability, our families, the society that we create eventually expresses the challenges and the problems that we have within ourselves and within our families. Eventually, we have to go back to the source. Eventually, we have to go, not that we should give up our families or give up our church just because we have problems, but to recognize that the source of the problems always goes back to the individual. Every part of life is preparation for the next stage of life. When we're a baby in our mother's womb, we're preparing to become a person in the world, to become a baby in the world. When we're a child, we're preparing to become an adult. When we're an adult, we're preparing to have a spouse. When we're a couple, we're preparing to have children and create a family. And our whole life is preparation for going to the spirit world afterwards. And it's the same thing in school. It's the same thing in business. It's the same thing in academics. Everything is built upon some foundation. God also spent a lot of time and effort to prepare a foundation for his children. The whole first part of biblical history was all a foundation to prepare for Jesus to be able to come. And the whole time since then has been a preparation for the second coming of Jesus to come. All time and energy and effort is preparation for very small moments and opportunities. But even still, it doesn't guarantee that things will always work out the way that God would want. And in our lives, even if we try to make as good of a foundation as possible and all the preparation as possible, it doesn't guarantee that things will work out for us either. But God is a God who fulfills his promises. God is God. God is who he is. If he wasn't God, if our God was not a loving God, a God that fulfilled his promises, a God that lived up to his word, then there wouldn't be much hope that this world could be better than it is. And I think that that's a lesson that we have to take to heart too. When we're creating our foundation, regardless of where we're at in our life, whether you're young or old, married, have a family, grandparents, whatever, this is something that we can always go back to. Am I a person who really makes effort to bring my mind and body together under God's will for my life? I think maybe something that's a little bit more relatable is, am I a person that puts God at the center of my life and makes effort to fulfill on my promises? Am I a person of integrity? If I say I'm going to do something, if I say I'm going to be somewhere, even at my own expense, will I fulfill that promise? Will I follow through with that thing that I said I would do? This is really the foundation of trust. If you know somebody, relationships are about relying on other people for something. And I've known a lot of people in my life. Not that I'm sure there's many people who've known many more people than me, but I've met many people, and I can say that some of the hardest relationships that I've had the opportunity to have are experiences where people promise that they will do something, and then they go back on their promise, or they forget, or they don't prioritize these kind of things. I don't know if it's like a fruit of the Spirit or something that's talked about in God's word or whatever, but I really feel that this is some aspect of God that we really need to inherit. Is this unconditional aspect of if God says he's going to do something, like if we make a promise or a commitment to God, then we have to take that seriously. Because I think that when God makes promises to us, he takes those seriously. Everything in our life is relationships. Our relationships in our family, our relationships in business, our relationships in our church. If we don't have trust, if we don't have a belief that what the person is saying in our life they're actually going to do, or they're going to take responsibility for, or if they make a mistake they'll apologize for, if we don't have trust in those things, then it's impossible to have a real relationship, a healthy relationship. So learning integrity is really important. And there's a couple other quotes that I found that I felt would be really good. There's one thing from Matthew. It says, "Everyone then," this is Jesus talking, "who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it." Very interesting, very poetic. Jesus is really making a clear distinction here about the difference between hearing words and acting on them, and hearing words and not acting on them. So I really feel that one of the best things that we can do in our lives is to follow through with our commitments, follow through with our promises, follow through with our vows, especially promises to God, but also promises that we make to ourselves and to others. There's so many lessons to learn in mistakes, but I gave a whole sermon on that a couple weeks ago, so I'm not going to go into that. I want to finish with a final verse that Chelsea sent me earlier this week, so I thank you, Chelsea. Teach me to do your will, for you are my God. May your precious spirit lead me forward onto firm footing. Psalm 143. So, if you've been challenged in your life to follow through with a commitment that you made to another person, to God, or you feel like maybe there was a commitment that you made that you broke and you have to take you haven't taken responsibility for it. You haven't made the effort to try to make it right. And maybe take this opportunity to really consider that. Think about that and think how much it's probably been weighing on your heart and your conscience more than you realize. Maybe now's the time to address it, to deal with it. And I think you would be surprised by how much that makes a difference in your life. So that is my message. Please join me in prayer. Good morning, dearest Heavenly Parent, gracious God. We come before you this morning humbly knowing that we've made so many mistakes, and when we come before you and really recognizing how amazing you are, even our strengths pale in comparison, and we become aware of so many of our own shortcomings and mistakes and ways in which we have pained you, Heavenly Parent, and pained our fellow human beings. I pray, Heavenly Parent, that no matter where we're at in our life today, that we can really recognize and really give you recognition. We can really value how much you have endured in your way to save humankind, how much you have unceasingly believed in our ability to be restored and to build your kingdom, even if it takes millions of years. You committed never to give up on us and to never give up on your dream and your ideal for this world. And Heavenly Parent, even on a daily basis, how much we get discouraged when we hit roadblocks and bumps in our life and disappointing situations and get hurt. Heavenly Parent, please help us to gain wisdom. Please help us to tap into that source within you that can allow us to overcome these situations, that can allow us to be able to live a more beautiful, rich, and meaningful life, Heavenly Parent, where we can put others' needs before our own. But it's so hard to do that when we're challenged with our own iniquities and our own shortcomings, Heavenly Parent. Please help us to overcome. Please help us to build a strong foundation for our lives, our families, our church, our community in this world, which is definitely built on a foundation of sand, as we can see with the results of the things that we see around us today, Heavenly Parent. We thank you for your unconditional love and your unconditional presence in our lives. For even if we go back on our promises, Heavenly Parent, we know that you are there, ready to fulfill on your side of things. And I offer this prayer on behalf of all of us here, and in my name, Michael Adonia Hendrick, Blessed Center family. Amen and adieu. Thank you.